fans, welcome back to Room 237, and I have another review for Ho Ho Horror 2020. And this time I'm going back to, I guess, the cult classic, 1972's Silent Night, Bloody Night. Now this is a movie that, title-wise, I've known about for a long time. Obviously it came out 12 years before the far more classic and notorious Silent Night, Deadly Night. For some reason, I always thought Silent Night, Bloody Night was more of like a witch or a coven film. I think I read somewhere once that it was. It's not at all. It's still a slasher film. It's more of a mystery. It's kind of a mess. It was directed by Theodore Gershony, who also wrote the film with Jeffrey Konvitz and Ira Teller. And they produced it along with Ami Artsy, Frank Vitale, and Lloyd Kaufman. Now, despite being produced by Lloyd Kaufman, it's nothing like a Troma film. It's nothing like Troma's horror films. It has the production of, say, an early Troma film. The budget was $295,000. Many of the cast members were actually former Andy Warhol stars, like Mary Warnoff, Ondine, Candy Darling, Kristen Steen, Tally Brown, Louis Love, the filmmaker Jack Smith, and the artist Susan Rothenberg. It was filmed in Long Island in 1970. I guess in 1972 it was originally released as Night of the Dark Full Moon, and in 1981 as Death House. I will say either one of those, especially Death House, would be a better title. Because even though it does take place on Christmas, we even have characters exchanging Merry Christmas to each other. This is about as much a Christmas movie as much a Christmas movie as Home Sweet Home is to Thanksgiving. It just takes place on Christmas. There's nothing Christmassy about it. We see, I think, a Christmas tree. It really doesn't live up to anything Christmassy, even for a horror film, that could give it such a title. I don't own it by itself. It is in the public domain. I don't know what these films are, but I have it as part of this collection, which comes with several other classic films, like The Driller Killer, Little Shop of Horrors, House on Haunted Hill, Bloody Pit of Horror, Bucket of Blood, films I didn't care for as much, like Don't Answer the Phone, and, you know, the Peter Cushing and Barbara Steele classics, Nightmare Castle, and Horror Express. So, as far as like these random ass collections, this is one of the better ones I have, next to the 50 movie classic. But anyway, so this is how I have Silent Night, Bloody Night. Now, this film is both good and bad for two different reasons. As a early Proto-Slasher film, low budget, it's good. Sleazy, it's got some good bloody kills, some camera work that we would see 2 years later in Black Christmas, such as POV shots, sort of early guerrilla style kind of tracking, panning shots. As a mystery, it's not good at all. It's actually kind of a mess. Each clue or advancement we get in the story, it leaves more questions than it answers. And then when we get to the ending, it is just, it's like, so what are we left with? I'm sure there'll be some comments of, like, I had this movie figured out the second the opening credits came on. Because I saw this back in 1972. I don't mean to mock anybody, but it's the internet. There's a lot of comments like that just saying, oh, I know what it is, because... And I'm not the only reviewer here on YouTube that says that the plot to this is confusing, the revelations and reveals at the end really either don't make sense or it leaves the film more convoluted than it deserves. It's narrated by this one character, Diane, who is the daughter of, I believe, the mayor? Yeah, Diane's the daughter of the mayor. She's, I guess, our narrator. We find out that there's this house that they call the Butler Mansion. On Christmas Eve, 1950, Wilford Butler bursts out of the house on flames, dies. And this takes place in East Willard, Massachusetts. It is then left to his grandson, Jeffrey, 20 years later, which takes us up to today. And the mansion was once an insane asylum. It was an insane asylum, then it was Butler's personal mansion, burned to death in 1950, left it to his grandson. Apparently it's like a big hallmark, or landmark, I should say, for the town. The town really wants to buy it back, sort of as property of the city itself. So the grandson, Jeffrey Butler, has hired a lawyer to meet with all the appropriate people of the city to give them their price. And in the beginning, it's set up kind of like Psycho, because John Carter is the lawyer, and we kind of follow him like the Janet Leigh character. He hasn't met Jeffrey Butler yet, but he's acting on his behalf, and as his lawyer, he meets with the mayor, the sheriff, the owner of the local newspaper, and the operator of the telephone switchboard. And for whatever reason, John Carradine, who's been in a lot of Universal horror films, he plays Charlie Tobin, who's the newspaper guy. He's mute for whatever reason. They even give him a bell. But when he does speak, it's like this raspy dubbing or sampling from something else. So Carradine himself is only in the film physically. Lawyer tells them that they have to have $50,000 by whatever time tomorrow. And then they start getting killed off. You kind of get the idea that they're all secretly in on something, because they keep insisting that the lawyers stay at this. Don't stay in the house like you're going to. Stay here at a hotel. In fact, stay at this very nice hotel. On us. But the lawyer has this young girlfriend or mistress, who I believe is also his secretary. They're having a romantic night together at the mansion. They go up to the bedroom, start doing their thing, and then they're murdered by someone with an axe. Now, as I said, as a sleazy, low-budget slasher film, it works. It's very fast cuts, up-close cuts, the sort of psycho-sounding music, shots of the axe up and down. It's pretty bloody. I mean, it had that low-budget, really dark red, sleazy look. The ending shot of like the golden bed frame with the bloody hand grasping it with the floral wallpaper. I love that shot. Which then the killer, whom we don't see, well, actually, he then puts a crucifix in the girlfriend's hand and calls he calls the sheriff, who says, "I've done this, you better come right out." And then he talks to Tess, who is the phone switchboard operator, and he starts calling himself Marianne, and he's whispering and stuff we would. A good portion of this film is stuff that we would see better 2 years later in Black Christmas. The calls with the whispering voice, the sort of the camera work, feels very Black Christmassy, but of course it predates it. So then we finally get introduced to Jeffrey Butler, the actual owner. He shows up at the mayor's house. Oh, all the while, there's been some escape at a nearby asylum. That's kind of a footnote, I guess. He just walks into the mayor's house. The daughter, Diane, holds him up, gets some ID, sees it's him, knows why he's in town. She directs him to the sheriff's house, or the sheriff's deputy's house. So while he goes there, the sheriff is going to the mansion where he was just called. But he stops off at Wilfred Butler's gravesite, which has been disturbed. I do like the shot of the digging. There's like this low to the ground, up close shot of the pile of dirt with the shovel dumping dirt. Very, again, low budget, grainy, gritty, not remastered at all, which I like. He gets beaten to death with the shovel. Jeffrey goes back to the mayor's house, talks to Diane. She's received weird phone calls for the mayor from Marianne, who has asked her to go out to the mansion. At one point, even Tess decides to go out to the mansion. Jeffrey meets up with Tobin, the mute. They start looking into the house's history. Which this is... Okay, so it starts to give us some exposition. Oh, well, when Tess is at the mansion, there's this flashlight on her. I like how this scene was shot, because it's all pitch black, just enough light on her face, this flashlight. The killer saying, like, you can't see me, but I can see you. Take my hand. Reaches for his hand, but it's a severed hand. Yeah, this movie's all over the fucking place. Because also, while Jeff and Diane are going to the sheriff's office, or going to the mansion, they pass the sheriff's abandoned car at the gravesite. That's when they stop at the newspaper office to meet the mute, and they getting into the house's backstory. Yeah, and then when she takes the severed hand, she screams and she's bludgeoned to death. Cut back and we see that the history that they give us is 1930, Wilfred's wife died of tuberculosis. 1933, his 15-year-old daughter Marianne was raped and got pregnant. The son she gives birth to is Jeffrey, who got sent away to California. Then 1935, Wilfred converted the mansion into a mental hospital, had Marianne committed, and then the rest of the story is what we already knew. 1950, he dies. Cut to today. Then we get Tess's death. And then so Jeffrey, she was beat to death with a candlestick. Yeah, like Clue. So then Jeffrey arrives at Tess's house. Of course, no one's there. Goes back to meet Diane at the newspaper place. And she tells him that, your mother didn't die during childbirth like you were told. She was actually committed to the house asylum. So then they decide to go to the mansion together. They pass they pass the mute's car, which has been set on fire. And then Charlie, the mute, goes to jump in front of Jeffrey's car for help. But, Jeffrey ends up hitting him by accident. They get out to look and they see his hand's been cut off. So they're like, well, that's odd. So then they get to the mansion and he finds his grandfather's diary, which reveals that his grandfather was the one that raped his own daughter, Marianne, gave birth to Jeffrey. So he's the grandson of Wilfred. And also how he started to resent the hospital staff. Christmas Eve of 1935, he freed the patients who revolted and massacred the staff, including Marianne. Then he ended up faking his death with the fire in 1950 and had been living under no name, apparently, at the nearby asylum, which he was the escaped person. And so Jeffrey and we see all that in flashback, and the flashback has like a really cool black and white with like a pinkish tint, almost like if you look up the Salvador Dali film Un Chien Andalou, the French silent film from 1929. Kind of got something like that. I love the look of it. The look of it is very eerie, surreal, kind of otherworldly. I like the look of it. He believes his grandfather to still be alive. It tells her that all the people that were killed throughout the movie, except for the lawyer, the people of the town were all former patients of the house asylum. And Wilfred is now seeking revenge for the death of Marianne because she was killed during that massacre. At this point, the mayor arrives with the rifle. He and Jeffrey end up shooting each other, okay? And then we see that the killer is, in fact, Wilfred, which Diane grabs Jeffrey's gun, shoots him. And then I guess she's the heir to the mansion because sometime later she's walking towards this bulldozer, takes one last look at the house. Credits roll as we can presume that the bulldozer crew is going to demolish the house. Had this movie been written and directed, or at the very least directed, and would have known what to do with this material, I will say that the direction is stronger than the writing. A lot of the camera work and some of the certain shots and editing is much stronger than the writing itself. The writing is the main problem because It's confusing. The more it explains, the less it makes sense. If this did not rely on mystery or try to be a mystery and just focus on, like, it could have got rid of so many things. Like, it could have kept the fact, oh, he actually, like, get rid of the whole incest and everything, or even the revolt and the massacre. Make it that he faked his death, went to the asylum, then escaped when he found out it was being sold. That it could have been a mystery. It would have been simple enough, and then that would have worked. I do like the look of the kills, especially the one with the lawyer and his girlfriend in bed. I thought that was edited just fine. Again, I really like the look, the gritty, grainy, low-budget look with the blood against the floral background. The camera work, like, we do get this nice kind of shaky early POV shot through the house, down the stairs, a lot like Black Christmas. The acting, I'm not really going to say much about the acting. With how low budget it is, we're going to get great actors. Of course, the best actor of the bunch happens to be mute, John Carradine. So, as just a sleazy proto-slasher, I think this movie's just fine. As a mystery, that's where it's really flawed. And yeah, its reveal and its ending didn't do much for the movie. I loved the look of the flashback sequences. I thought it was very surreal. Like I said, surreal and otherworldly. But it's not a Christmas movie. It takes place on Christmas. It's not enough to be called Silent Night, Bloody Night. Death House, which it got during its subsequent 80s release, would have been just fine. Yeah, it's as Christmassy as Home Sweet Home is to Thanksgiving. Not very good. Yeah, can I recommend it? As a proto-slasher, sure. But as one with like a good mystery or a twist or even a Christmas horror film, certainly not. I can't recommend it. I guess this would be like a mild rant or like a semi-rant, but I don't know where I heard that this was like a witch or a coven film. Maybe there's another one similarly named that I got it confused with. I mean, I'm glad that it was a slasher film, but yeah. Of other films of its kind and time, just stick to Black Christmas. It's way, way, way better. But yeah, so that is 1972's Silent Night, Bloody Night. Thank you for watching.